Hello and welcome to Audiogyan. Today is a very special day because Mr. Kedar Nimkar, who's been behind Audiogyan, completes 300 episodes of Audiogyan. My name is John Pathrose. I'm only here because I know this man for about 20 plus years and I've seen his journey and we've shared two cities and right now we share the same city, which is Singapore. We have a very interesting episode lined up, but let's actually start with some really foundational questions. Kedar, who are you?
I am a Bombay boy, passionately curious, and I'm a designer by profession. But Audiogyan has been kind of a passion project for last 7 years, so I can call myself a podcaster as well.
Yeah, and tell us about how Audiogyan came about. When did you start? How did you start? How was the journey?
It started in December 2016, and frankly, I had no clue that I'll be doing this like 7 years.
It's a long time.
So, it started because I wanted to actually document people from the field of design and performing arts. I don't come from a design school background and learned on the job. So I thought I'll ask fellow designers and some mentors what is design like, right? And luckily, a friend of mine, his dad is an architect, Sharat Patwardhan, was the first episode. And he gave some interesting insights and it was quite enriching to revisit some fundamentals of design. And the same year, I think, in fact, the same month, I was in Bangalore and Bangalore Literature Festival, or I think some comedy, some gig. Varun Grover was there. And I met him and I asked that, can you come on the show? And he's, as usual, like very open about these engagements. So he came on the show, I think, on the 6th or 9th episode.
Yeah.
And that kind of gave me a lot of confidence. Ki chal yaar, aise kuch try kar sakte hain.
Yeah, wonderful. So 300 episodes, no joke. This is Sparta kind of a moment for you. How do you feel about this milestone?
I feel good, but it's also kind of mixed because those who have been listening to Audiogyan know that I'm little influenced by Hindustani classical music. And when I used to listen to Kishori Amonkar or people like talking about learning one rag for like 12 years and 15 years and 25 years, I think I've just started. So It feels good, but it feels humbling also.
I think humbling. A little influenced by Hindustani classical in itself is a very humble statement. I know you're crazy influenced by Hindustani classical music. I want to actually talk about being humble, Kedar. I think when I ask you these questions, I have a sense that you're going to be very humble in the way you answer. So let's actually get the numbers, do the talking for a little bit, God. It is true, you've had so many people watch you, so many people who came on and spoke their hearts out about, the different topics that you covered. Let's get your viewers a lens of what numbers look like for Audiogyan 300 episodes down the line.
Okay. Yeah, I can share some numbers, but definitely it's a very niche podcast. So I wouldn't compare myself to like the YouTubers or the influencers or Instagram kind of followers. But
fair warning has been given. Right, let's go.
Yeah, but just to give a sense, obviously 300 episodes, about 15,000 minutes of content, about 8 million listens. And I think the most proud moment for me is that I've captured almost 50 plus subdisciplines of design and art, right? I mean, when a part of the project is also to document, but also to like make people aware of what design is, right? And when we talk about design, generally these days the UI UX world is there, but there's type design, there's just like endless. I've spoken to puppeteers, I've spoken to textile designers, and just a bunch of people. So 50 subdisciplines in design and art, and I think around 5 million downloads kind of a thing, because I've switched few hosting services. So I think cumulatively that will be the number.
I think if you started 8 years ago, you probably would have had to go through that journey. 8 million people have listened to your podcast. That is an outstanding number. Are these people typically from India? And what is the global outreach for Audiogyan?
So, yes, predominantly it's India. Within India, it's Bombay, Bangalore, Pune, surprisingly, Hyderabad, wherever podcast penetration is decent. But again, if you compare with mainstream, it wouldn't make sense. But being a niche, I think I was very happy that around 20 to 30% will be from America, and about 5% from Australia, and about 10% from pockets of Europe. But the more enriching experience or gratifying feeling comes when, like, I remember, like, obviously I get mails quite often, but one mail which I clearly remember is that a person from US mailed saying that this is a great episode and I wanted to use this for my thesis in my PhD project. Can you transcribe it in English because my guide doesn't understand English? Actually, I can add 3 languages also as a stats because typically people are comfortable with English, or maybe in India it's bilingual.
Yeah.
But I come from a Maharashtrian background, so I've done few episodes in Marathi, which are great, but they have the maximum listens also.
Yeah, no, it's. I think it's all about keeping it real. And I think your journey has been about keeping it real. So keep it real, but use the tech to translate it. So that's a great way to do it. Yeah, then I'm going to just take you to that uncomfortable zone a little bit because I know your conversations are in the philosophical space and all of that. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of glam element right now. So imagine you're at an award show where you're getting an award for 300 episodes of Audiogyan. You have about half a minute, and if you exceed that time, the music will play. You're in your tuxedo. There are really, really beautiful people watching you. 30 minutes, what do you want to tell people for winning this achievement award of 300 episodes?
Wow. But yeah, I would actually thank everyone. Thank all the listeners. Thanks. And more importantly, I think I want to thank my family, friends, and mentors, especially the family and friends, because recording at odd hours, recording sometimes on the fly, there's a lot of sacrifice in passion project, and especially me being almost going solo. But first year, I used to do everything, and then later on, I had my sound editor. A good
time's up.
Yeah, that's it. So thank you.
Super. Thank you, Kedar. So you know what? I think that's a good first cut of what Kedar is like at a very basic level. I want to actually, when I thought about coming and talking to you about Audiogyan and the 300 episodes, one common theme that I found in your conversations is philosophy. No matter what conversation you have and who you have it with, you always find a way to bring philosophy in. So for your 300th episode, I want to talk about 3 topics. Okay, the first one is about design. Then we talk about knowledge. And then I want to talk a little bit about passion. Because from an outsider perspective, having seen you go through this journey, I can tell you that these are the 3 things that I'm really proud of looking at how you've achieved this milestone, right? You ran with passion. I'm assuming you had a lot of knowledge come your way as you spoke to so many people. And I also want to get a sense of you now being an advanced design human being, what your brain looks like right now from a design perspective. Okay? Sure. And just to add in the keep the philosophy theme going, I'm going to start with a sloka and I'm going to get into these topics, okay? Awesome. So I'm walking your path. This is my uncomfortable place. This is your comfortable place, okay? But let's keep the answers honest. Yeah. So the first sloka that I want to use is Asatoma Satgamaya, which translates to lead me from the untruth to the truth. And I thought about this because I was thinking about a way to talk to you about design, right? And for me, I come from a world where design is UI, UX, design is about things that you see and feel. And after listening to Audiogyan and after looking at the breadth and depth of, you spoke about, talking to 50 different subcategories of design and so on, artists and designers and so on, I understood the fact that design is a lot beyond, what you see and what you feel. And, I was reading about how design is about seeking truth. Okay. So again, you can feel the depth there, right? So now we're talking the same language. So that's my first context, Asatoma Satgamaya, which is about design being a journey to truth from untruth. And from that perspective, I want to ask you the first question, which is, what is design from your perspective? And I ask you this question because 8 years before when you started Audiogyan, I would assume that you would have a very different answer to this question. Yeah. So after being in the journey, what is design? How does Kedar define design?
With certain authority of like 20 years in the field of design, and obviously spoken to 300 guests on the show, I am still not very certain what is design. Okay. But I can try and attempt to answer from whatever I have gathered and my take on it. Okay. And recently it has changed even further. Okay. So what is design? I think design is, since you have three sets, I have three answers to it. So first is design is about asking questions, about asking really uncomfortable, comfortable, all sorts of questions. So first is about asking questions. The second is about crafting, and I specifically would use the craft. So crafting creative solutions to those problems or questions. And third is achieving the desired outcomes.
Can you tell a bit more?
For example, there has been a lot of controversial topic with certain people about design and art being sort of expression, or what is expression, what is art, what is design, and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah.
So here I want to stress on like having an outcome. So when you're designing, there could be an element of self-expression, but you're definitely solving a problem. So solving a problem has an outcome, right?
Yeah.
This got solved or this got fixed. So I think these three are fundamental blocks which I've understood. And the biggest one is it's in a continuum. It's not a static thing that I've designed. You are constantly designing. I think that's almost equivalent to a doctor-like profession where you're practicing. You're like a lawyer who are practicing. So to just keep practicing, that is design.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. That's quite broad as well. What do you think the impact of design is? That's a way you define it in those three different areas. What is the impact of design in, and again, the reason why I wanted to ask you this question is because people like me don't understand the impact of design as much as I should, right? It requires a certain higher level of observation, for example, to understand that many things that are designed are taken for granted, right?
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about the impact of design?
I think that you are like touching something, you're feeling something. I think everything is designed, right? The best example that I have formulated is you take a condom, you take a cradle, you take a coffin, like all stages before conception, after conception, and after you are dead, right? Everything is designed. So that's how I look at it. And obviously, when we look at more practical and pragmatic aspects of living in the world, which obviously these three are, but like designing weapons of mass destruction to building addictive apps, to building the seat and the table that we are sitting on, the floor, everything is designed. So for me, I think life-saving pills to building a city of how people walk, how safe they feel, the watch, everything that I see is designed. So it's very tough for me to like
Put it in a bucket.
In fact, I did one flash talk back in 2012 or something where I spoke about design of a thali.
Right.
So yeah, for me, like food and everything just lands up in design.
So you're the Hrithik Roshan version of Sab Likha Hua Hai. It's like everything is designed. Got it. That's interesting. I think, I know this is a difficult question because it's almost like the evolution in itself is an evolution of design and so on and so forth. Very interesting. What is your perspective on the opportunities in the world of design for someone who wants to get into the space of design, right? And again, I don't talk about now that I'm in your zone. I'm not talking about design from a UI UX perspective and so on. But what is the current opportunity in the world of design?
Oh, again, that is also very wide, right? I mean, I had the fortune of working with a company named What Can Design Do?
Yeah,
and they like I'll put the link in the show notes, but like they cover everything from sustainable cities to building, just looking around you and whatever can be designed, whatever is poorly designed. And actually, I wanted to add to the earlier question is that there is good design and there is bad design. There is no design can never exist. So that gives you an answer of what design for this is up to, right? But I've spoken to a lot of professors and academicians, and on that note, I can say that there's a article by Professor M.P. Ranjan where he's spoken about where India needs design intervention, right? And one of the aha moment which I had was while talking to Aniruddha Joshi, who's a professor at IDC, and he said that there is a ratio, or there has to be some ratio after 10 people, one cop, or 5 people and one doctor, right? Or like 10 people and one lawyer, that kind of thing, right? And in India, if we assume, and this was 2017, so I'm taking those numbers. So if you assume that every 1,000 person needs one designer, so what is the number of designers we need in India? And the number was quite different. We wanted around 20 million designers, while we have about 20,000 designers or whatever. Like Aniruddha Joshi spoke about something, the proportion of designer to normal person is quite huge. So that has to be done. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunity. And if you look around, everything that you see, wherever there is, actually design is also concept or a mindset. As you said, observations. If you see something, if you observe very closely, and if you see some gaps, and if you fix it, you are a designer.
Yeah. That's, we've had a couple of questions where you went really broad in terms of almost struggling to put design in a bucket, right? So let me actually ask you a very pointed question. Sure. If you were to meet someone who comes and tells you, hey, Kedar, I want to be a designer, what are the two questions that you'll ask this person?
I've been hiring for last 10, 12 years. And obviously, what does design mean to you is a question which I generally ask. I will turn the table around and ask, like, what does design mean to you? Number one.
Right.
And one more question is that why do you want to get into design, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I clearly remember I was invited for a talk at Ahmedabad Design Week, where the conference was about design for defense. And I could see a lot of people around me just asking that they want to get into UI, UX, while the speaker on the top was India's Army General. And he was saying that we need designers so that we can pump water to the high hills and the glaciers, and the water gets frozen. So can you design good pipes for us?
Yeah.
So you get the drift, right? Like, it's so wide. So it all depends on actually the kind of role that I'm going to hire for.
Right. Got it. Another question for you. Tell me 2-3 examples of great designs that you've seen. Right. Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, I think it's again very tough, but any example will equally make an impact, because it actually depends on, I'm bringing the philosophy angle, it's how you look at it.
Sure, yeah.
I remember talking to one type designer where he said that he designed a typeface in Odia, Shiva Nellaparamal. And he said, just because we designed a good typeface in Odia, now they have good textbooks which are more readable, so you are impacting education. And it's quite insightful, right? Like, I mean, because you have Ek Type as a foundry in India who are designing good Devanagari fonts and fonts and typefaces in almost 11 scripts, right? It just opens up a lot of avenue for communication designers, and frankly, everyone must have seen the Ballu font. So it's just used by politicians and placards, and so that one font designer is now, and then you have wrestlers sitting in Jantar Mantar protesting with that font.
Right.
It all depends on where you see what, and that's how design.
I didn't know about Ballu font, by the way, so now you know. Yeah. So that is that you like that design for the impact, the broad impact that was able to bring a small thing, a small design act that was able to bring in a big impact to a large group of people. Yeah. Another example. This is quite interesting. If somebody asks me this question, I'll start thinking about some websites or so. So this is interesting. What else?
I think I'll take another example, which in fact I had taken down I shared this during the Ahmedabad Design Week. So while there were troops deployed in Afghanistan, there was they called it something called as a communication device. Mm-hmm. So there was a platoon of soldiers in a particular spot who were American, and they were communicating with the Air Force as to where to drop the bomb, right? Now, this communication device also has a GPS tracker in it, right? Yeah. So where they are standing, they generally turn on it and they tell that please drop it here, and they move to the next base, right? Yes. But unfortunately, that device went off because the batteries were dead. And then while they replaced the batteries, they moved ahead, assuming that this was done. But the problem was that when you put in the battery, there were some 5 different settings that they had to do to invoke that thing again.
Right.
So the entire batch got destroyed with the bombing. Oh. And it's a very sad state, and especially because of bad design.
That explains why there are too many people from US watching your Audiogyan, because they want to save lives. They don't know how to do it. Wonderful, Kedar. Thank you so much. You know what? We're going to switch gears. We're going to go to the next segment. right? And I'm calling this the Tamasoma Satgamaya segment, which translates to lead me from darkness to light.
Wow.
And this is about the power of knowledge, right? And again, looking at you go through this journey, I know this is a hyper personal passion project for you and you drove it so hard and so much. I'm really fascinated with the knowledge one can gain by speaking to so many people who are experts in their fields, right? It would have really translated you into a person who seeks knowledge, leads with knowledge, and takes that to everything that you do, right? I have seen the change in you as well. When I speak to you, you're not the vanilla guy anymore. Like you will be coming up with quotes from people, you will be name dropping people that I've never heard before. Like you'll talk about Baloo font, like everybody knows it and I didn't, right? So you become that person where, you become that one with knowledge kind of a person. And I'm really interested in that journey because I think, personally, I felt that I felt really comfortable and I felt great value for time when I'm with people who lead with knowledge, right? So I want to talk about that, and I thought Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya is a good sloka to go with. This is about darkness to light and that journey. Tell us about your learnings. Tell us about the key knowledge aspects that you've picked up from 300 episodes of Audiogyan. What are your top 3 learnings from Audiogyan? Again, I know I'm asking you difficult questions, but after running 300, after troubling 300 people with difficult questions, Kedar, this is just plain karma, right? So let's just go with it.
Yeah. No, I think I've been thinking about this, and typically what happens is when I listen to, first of all, I don't listen to many of my past episodes, but there are certain aha moments while you're recording and while you're making notes. And sometimes people share that I love this, and then I go and visit that episode again, and then there is an aha moment. But I think I'll try and recollect maybe, let's see, 2-3 moments. So one which I vividly remember is when I was having a chat with Neelkanth Cheya, the professor from SET. He said knowledge is so explosive that you can't contain it in a library. I think that's a tweet or a quote over the line.
Yeah.
But that's very powerful, especially when you know about Neelkanth Cheya. I think that really gives you a perspective of what knowledge is, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, the legendary B.V. Doshi, who's no more now, but I had the fortune of interviewing him for 20 minutes.
Yes.
The Pritzker Award winner. And I was in Ahmedabad. I just flew to Ahmedabad just to talk to him for 20 minutes. He was 92 at that time.
Wow.
And like he said that, and in my conversation, it is one of my favorite episodes. He said that in design or in art or in any of creative endeavors, you don't have to really make something big. You make a small thing and just have a lot of care and love while doing it, and it does the job. For example, he said that when I was designing the low-cost indoor housing, I imagined that the family is going to come and stay here, but what are the kids or what are the couples, 3 generations or 2 generations, what are they going to do? In fact, the woman of the house, if she's like a homemaker, she's sitting down and she's chatting with the next person. So I will give her a small plinth where she can sit and talk. So it's a subtle thing.
Yeah.
It adds so much value. So that moment was quite memorable for me. This is one of my favorite. Again, I generally, when I go philosophical, I had this question for a very long time, which I keep using, but I finally found an answer long time ago with Varun Grover. So I asked Varun Grover, should art depict society or should society learn from art? Right? So art will happen in its own space. And then like there are plays and theater and like cinema and whatever, painting and poetry.
Yeah.
And those are at a higher pedestal and then people learn from it, right?
Yeah.
Should that be the process or should art be just a matter of fact what's happening in the world? Right? To which he gave a very interesting answer. He said that I have a problem with the word should. So he dismissed the entire question.
Right.
And he said like, what is should? Like there's nothing should, right? It's a give and take.
Yeah.
And that's about it. So that was an penny drop moment.
That was a learning, ask better questions.
And one last thing which I remember is Anupama Hoskare. Anupama Hoskare is a puppeteer, and I asked her that a lot of puppetry stories which happen in India, or for that matter, where India takes stories abroad, it's typically Ramayana and Mahabharata. What's the deal with it? Do we have new stories to tell in puppetry? And she said, Kreda, frankly, if you take a cross section of India, vertically from Ayodhya to Kanyakumari, it's Ramayana.
Right.
And from horizontally Gujarat to, which is kind of Krishna's birthplace, Dwarka to Mathura, and like Mathura to that side, it's all Mahabharata.
Right.
So you cut India in vertical and horizontally, and you see Ramayana and Mahabharata ingrained. So that was again a very, very
Wow, that's powerful. I haven't heard this episode.
Yeah.
That's a great way to think about it. Very interesting.
Can I add one more because that this is most recent
fun, like amazing. Yeah.
most recent episode I did with Ayaz Basrai, and he's one great thinker. Ayaz Bhaijan, if you're listening, salam. So I think he said something nice because I said, what is the recently in the new series that I've done, I've started asking Proust questionnaire.
Yeah.
So in one of the questions that I asked Ayaz was, what is that one thing that you want others to have? And he said, long time ago in the human civilization, especially in Southeast Asia, there were certain tribes in which there was one person who used to just think of 7 generations. What's going to happen after 7 generations? So you want people of that caliber,
right,
or people of that mentality and thought process, and doing just that, like sitting and thinking 7 generations next, what's going to happen, and they are the guides or the architects.
This is an intergenerational episode. Oh, I love that episode.
Yeah.
Great, Ketan. I think we can go on with these stories forever. This is what I think makes it such a rich experience for you, right? You have all these stories in your mind. You have all these perspectives in your mind, and it will be hidden somewhere because you're asking this question, you're actively engaging. I think it just makes you a better person. And to me, that is a very envious place for you to sit in, right? Just by troubling people with difficult questions, you're getting to learn so much, and you're just creating such a front runner in your personality, which is knowledge, right? And I think that is amazing. You also have a corporate world that you operate in, and very often people talk about fake it till you make it kind of an economy that we run in the corporate world. What is the role of knowledge in the corporate world? There are many conversations about introverts and their place in the corporate world. Is the one who speaks the most, the loudest, the most knowledgeable, so on and so forth. So there's a lot of conversation about many soft aspects of how to balance the corporate world. And I do think there is a world where there are people who lead with knowledge, and then there are people who lead with what comes from their mouth, and the not ignorance, but just a different way in which you operate, like being more practical, being more, I guess, I'm finding the word for it, man. But you understand what I'm saying, right? The operationally skilled people, right? Like there are people who really drive a career with just their ability to operate things up, right? What do you think the role of knowledge is in the corporate world?
That's a tough one. I mean,
there are no simple questions here.
No, I think because I've borrowed a lot of learnings from Audiogyan into my profession, but frankly, there is no 1:1 mapping that which can translate into, these are few check boxes which have been identified, and then you can optimize them for the corporate world. But what I can tell is there are very softer aspects which I've tried to learn and then translate into my work style, right? And these are frankly very mundane. Okay. So in one of the recent episodes also, Hardik Pandya mentioned the same thing. The first one is, I think...
Hardik Pandya?
No, the
original Hardik Pandya.
I think simplest thing which anybody, or at least I've learned from my podcast world to the corporate world, is just show up. Right? Consistency. Just show up as a leader, show up as a doer, show up as an individual contributor. Just show up and be consistent. I think that will take a long way as opposed to applying any sort of gyan. Because frankly, in fact, I did one series of 12 episodes called Where Are the Designers? I'll put the link in the show notes. So it's speaking to 12 influential leaders from India, from Swiggy to Make My Trip to Clear Trip to a lot of different. In fact, I spoke to 2 design recruiters as well, right? And the reason for making that series was because I come with almost 12 to 15 years of experience, while the new design generation whom I'm hiring or are getting into the job force are about 2 to 4 years. So I wanted this middle layer of 8 to 10 years of experience people who can actually translate that gyan to an execution level.
To operate it out.
Yeah. The second learning which I had and which can be there for corporate people also is that you're sitting on shoulders of giants. Which means that it's a good project as Audiogyan as a project to just understand who the giants are, what they did, and how can you take that and take it forward. Right? So I'll quote Jean-Luc Godard here, saying that it's not important where
we all know him, right? So this is the trouble. Nowadays, this is the trouble talking to this man. He starts quoting people, and you're like, okay, cool. Pretend you fake it till you make it.
I mean, the filmmaker.
Sure, what did he say?
He said it's not important where you take things from, but it's important where you take them to.
Oh, nice.
Nice. So that's one learning. Again, borrowing from B.B. Doshi, I will say in the corporate world, or for that matter, any of the world that you want to live in, I think stay humble and be porous. I think that's one thing which I've learned. Like you go with zero prejudices, you go with zero understanding, you go as a blank slate and talk to these people and try and absorb as much as you can.
All right. So Bruce Lee said, be like water. And he said, be porous.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
You have Bruce Lee here. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we do. Yeah. Right. There you go. Kedar, one more question I have around knowledge, which is pretty much everybody that you spoke to are knowledgeable people in the space that they operate in. And I know you've covered 300, so this again is probably a tough question for you to sort of triangulate. But also one of the things that I look at when you've gone through this journey is the fact that you've spoken to 300 people who are super knowledgeable in the space that they operate in. I wanted to get a sense from you in terms of the commonalities or the common traits that you found in all these people that you've spoken to. Is there a commonality at all?
Yeah, there is. In fact, there's a clear pattern that is emerging.
Yeah.
And something which maybe listeners can know about very soon. Anyway, there is a very, very peculiar pattern.
Okay.
One is, I think, as I said previously, stay humble, work hard, and be porous. I think a lot of people who have been on the show and I have learned from them is that as long as there's a drive to understand and be an open palette and just absorb as much as you can from a book, from a poetry, from a painting, from whatever you see, whoever you meet, that's very, very critical. This one more pattern is nobody claims to have any strong opinion on anything because they are so open-minded right now that yes, there are certain areas where they have strong opinions, but I think they are still very loosely held because they have seen or exposed themselves to so much that anything is possible in the world is the premise at which they are operating.
Right.
And third learning, I think, which is being consistent at whatever they are doing. In fact, I wanted to add this, actually a fourth one also, but I'll club and see, is that I remember watching a Steve Jobs video where he said that when I was I just picked up a call for my summer internship or something like summer holidays, and I called HP and I said that I want to work in that assembly line or whatever, wherever I want to work. And he said, I think 95% of the people just don't pick up that call.
Most people don't get those experiences because they never ask. But I called up Bill Hewlett when I was 12 years old, and he lived in Palo Alto. His number was still in the phone book. And he answered the phone himself. He said, yes. He said, hi, I'm Steve Jobs. I'm 12 years old. I'm a student in high school, and I want to build a frequency counter. And I was wondering if you had any spare parts I could have. And he laughed, and he gave me the spare parts to build this frequency counter, and he gave me a job that summer at Hewlett-Packard, working on the assembly line, putting nuts and bolts together on frequency counters. He got me a job in the place that built them. Most people never pick up the phone and call. Most people never ask, and that's what separates sometimes the people that do things from the people that just dream about them.
Right. They just don't pick and call the other person thinking of, I don't know what is the problem, but so that one thing of taking that first step is very, very critical. That's been my learning. I've made so many cold emails with, fortunately, 95% success rate. So I think there is a lot of threads which are common in all these things, and these people have an underlying, almost like a subtext across the board, right? So I think the first one is question everything. That's a common understanding. Don't accept things the way they are. You got to question them.
including people questioning the questions that you're asking, right?
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
Yeah, almost not borderline, but almost like a clear rebel. Otherwise, you're not going to challenge the status quo. The second commonality is grind. You have to grind every day.
Yeah.
You have to embrace the boring part. Yeah, slog, sweat, and just be at it, right? Like be consistent and just embrace the grind, right? And there's like embrace the mundane. Yeah, and care, love, empathy.
So, Kedar, I think, thank you so much for sharing the bit about knowledge. I think this is one of the most envious part of this journey that I wanted to really understand from you as to what that journey was like for you. The third and the final segment that I want to talk to you about is about the power of passion. The sloka that I wanted to use, because again, we are following your philosophical theme, is Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya, which translates to lead me from death to immortality. Right now, to me, the sloka, sort of talks about soul that flies over, your body and your mind and so on, and it's almost the journey of being pure, right? And I have seen you do and nurture Audiogyan in the middle of hectic corporate job, and you've climbed the ladder pretty fluently. You've had a family that that you had to look after. You had a dog that you had to look after. There's just so much going on. There's nothing that you start running and you don't, you suddenly become Forrest Gump and so on. So there's just so much that has gone on in your life, but you've held on to Audiogyan and you've now pushed 300 episodes. And I think you just cannot do that without that level of purity in passion, right? So I want to talk a little bit about this. So I want to start from understanding, what does passion mean to you, and how has passion influenced your Audiogyan journey, a long 8-year and running Audiogyan journey? What role did passion play in this?
I think passion is the most abused word in the corporate world. Okay. Because since we are talking about Asatoma Sadgamaya and Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya, I think in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is teaching about dispassion and detachment. I think better than passion, we should use the word love and care, right? Because passion comes with certain expectations. When you are delivering those things, you are totally invested in it. But if it doesn't work out, there's a lot of disappointment which comes in.
Yeah.
So for me, I think passion can be replaced with care or love. And if you read Swami Vivekananda or if you read Vincent van Gogh, all talk about love. Right?
Yeah.
I think the movie documentary called Abstract on Netflix also talks a lot about having no passion but having a lot of care.
Replacing passion with love and care. And that is what you have been nurturing. It becomes more warm for you to sort of nurture. Very interesting perspective. Interesting. Kedar, I think the second question that I have about passion is, how do you spot passion in people, right? And I know now passion is not your favorite word. So let's just use passion as a replacement for love and care, right? How do you spot that in people, right? What is your, how do you understand that somebody is passionate about something? What shows?
Yeah. I remember a very close friend and one of the most well-read persons who has also been on Audiogyan.
You can't talk about me, Kedar.
Huh?
You can't talk about me in this, yeah.
No, it's our common friend Vikram Galot.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So he said that Kedar, like lot of people actually need 2 rotis, but they are earning for 3 rotis or probably want 3 rotis. So where do you draw the line, right? Extending that question forward, extending that answer forward, for me, like one of the signs of being passionate is what else do you do after roti, kapda, and makan? I think roti, kapda, makan plus passion, like plus as in like add passion to it, right? You can spot people going beyond these 3 things, then you can see there is an element of passion. But what they're doing extra is there's also a very fundamental factor that how long are they doing for that extra thing. I think this is a clear sign of passion for me. And the second is the shloka that you're mentioning. It generally recited before any Vedanta talk.
Yeah.
So there was a talk by Swami Sarvapriyananda where he explained passion in a very interesting way. He said that in India we have a concept called Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. Right? In the Western world, there's a closest parallel that he tried to bring in was that Martin Seligman, he once said, he's a psychologist, he said, happiness is equal to passion plus engagement
Mhm.
plus meaning.
Right.
So you are happy
Mm.
when you have passion, right? So
Yeah.
you are passionate about watching football,
Mhm.
but when you engage, there's much more refinement to it.
Yeah.
And when you win and you donate that stuff, or you win for some cause, or you play for some cause,
Mm.
there's a meaning to it, right? So all three coupled together brings in happiness.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether these two dots are connecting, but for me, it's very, very clearly connecting. So when you go beyond certain basics of life, I think that's where the passion lies in.
Interesting. I'm going to ask you the last question that I have about this, which is the whole balance that you have to do as someone who is passionate about the world of design and the Audiogyan conversations that you have, to someone who runs a corporate job, to someone who runs a house, to someone who runs marathons, to everything. There has to be, and I've spoken to too many people who would say, I used to watch cricket. I was very passionate about cricket, but then I got married and I don't watch it anymore. Or I used to do X and then I had kids and I don't do that anymore. Or I changed my job and I used to love something and now I've changed my job and it's hectic and I don't do it. So I think there is a place where passion tends to take a backseat as life comes and stares at you in different shapes and forms, right? What is that balance like for you? Because you have gone through this journey where you pulled through 300 episodes, where from a time when you had hair on your head and no gray hair, right? To where you sit today. So, and lots of change, right? Including the country that you're working in and so on. What is a good way to think about chasing or continuing to keep your passion alive as life comes and asks different questions?
Yeah. Oh, this has been a great revelation for me, especially in the last 1 year that I moved to this place called Singapore. And I think there are two things which can help you probably see this through for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Is one is that in your mental makeup, in your mental model, where do you keep things where, right?
Yeah.
In terms of priority.
Yeah.
I think that defines a lot for you.
I understand.
And obviously, generally, people who are more passionate are. I'm a person who likes to do many things simultaneously also. So, the second hack, which I thought is just carving out dedicated time for dedicated things.
Yeah.
Right? So, will you be surprised if I tell you that, oh, John, you have brushed your teeth for 36,000 days back to back? And you will be like, what's the big deal, right? Because I do it daily. So I'm going to borrow some concepts from my close friend Anirban, and he said there's something called as an event, and then there's something called as a routine. Right. The moment you put your stuff in routine, you don't have to worry about when it's going to start, when it's going to end. It's just routine. You put your brush your teeth. All these
Shoulder of the giant hair on your oil. Great. The giant of the shoulder. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So the moment you put everything in, not everything, but limited things in routine, I think it just follows a natural pattern. Eventually get good at it. In fact, just before the recording, I was watching just Instagram, and James Clear said that you don't have to worry about how quickly you have to climb the mountain or how efficiently you have to climb the mountain. You have to worry about what mountain you want to climb. So yeah, if you know that you want to do a podcast or be a podcaster, you have to just be at it, right?
Interesting, Kira. I wanted to close the segment with a couple of more questions, and I promise this is the last one. Again, not easy questions, but let me just ask it. What does the next 300 episode look like for Audiogyan?
Yeah, I think I'll continue talking to more people, preferably going out of the design and art spectrum, because now I can connect a lot more dots. I'll experiment with few new formats, and definitely I want the listeners and viewers now to participate more. So stay tuned. I'll be reaching out to you very soon.
I want to wrap this up And I'm asking you this because, I just want to tell all the viewers, right? So every time I talk to Kedar, he's just so good at quoting people, right? And Kedar is a person who has the most random quote. Like, we all have a favorite quotes, but Kedar will have a quote that is just something that you would never have appreciated. And then he will come and bring that home to you by explaining what it means and giving the context and so on. So I just want to give this last page. What is your favorite quote and why?
Can I give two?
Okay, let's go.
Okay, so one is I heard from Anand Gandhi in his TEDx talk, and it's obviously a Buddhist quote, which goes like this: that when you don't know Zen, rivers are rivers, mountains are mountains. When you are learning Zen, rivers are not rivers, mountains are not mountains. When you have learned Zen, rivers are rivers, mountains are mountains.
Okay.
So it goes full circle. And the second is from my favorite person, Swami Vivekanand. And he said, there's no difference in kind, it's only in degree. Let's keep that as a separate episode because it will take a long time. And for now, I think I'm not in a great authority also to explain that quote. But it's a very beautiful quote. And I'm making a poster of it very soon.
Wonderful, Kedar. Thank you so much. Congratulations on your
Thank you.
amazing run with Audiogyan. I can see a pattern emerging in the conversation. So thank you so much. When you hit your 600 mark or 500 mark, I will be back to ask him more difficult questions.
Awesome.
Let's do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.